Hello, welcome to the YouTube channel of the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication of Rani Billa Girls College. Today, we are going to learn the non-statistical methods of the research methodology. Now, here we would discuss about the historical methods, the descriptive methods of the methodology of the research. Now, first come to historical research. Now, before that, we have to learn about what is history. Now, what is history? History, as commonly understood, may refer to events themselves on the record of events. History may be interpreted very broadly to include nature as well as man. There is a history of the process of evolution, as Darwin made clear. But in general usage, history refers to the study of man and what happened to him. History is the past experience of mankind. More exactly, history is the memory of that past experience as it has been preserved largely in written records. Thus, it is a product of historians' work in reconstructing the flow of events derived from the sources of information, putting it into the narrative account. Now, next we come to the scope for historical research method. Number one is the subject matter of history constitutes the significant past, meaning the institutions and individual actions that affect the experience and development of the whole communities. And traditionally, it focuses on the action of governments, their leaders, and the conflicts among them. During the past 100 years or so, scope of history has widened to also include history of ideas, the patterns and trends in economic and social life that influence our society as a whole as well as characterize it. Next, we come to what constitutes historical research. The first point would be true historical research or historiography is concerned with analyzing and interpreting the meaning of historical events. It is a process by which a researcher is able to reach a conclusion as to the probable truth of an event in the past, studying objects available for observation in the present. Now, it is a flowing, dynamic account of the events, of past events, which involves as interpretation of these events in an attempt to recapture the nuances, personalities, and ideas that influenced those events. It follows that historical research constitutes a narrative account of past events written on the basis of interpretation of those events. Now, what are the advantages? The research is not physically involved in the situation under study. No danger of experimenter-subject interaction. Documents are located by the researcher, data is gathered, and conclusions are drawn out of sight. Historical method is much more synthetic and eclectic in its approach than other research methods, using concepts and conclusions from many other disciplines to explore the historical record and to test the conclusions arrived at by other methodologies. Perhaps more than any other research methods, historical research provides librarians with a context. It helps to establish the context in which librarians carry out their work, understanding the context that can enable them to fulfill their functions in the society. What are the limitations? The human past is a subject matter of historical research. It is to be noted that the past can only be known through the relics that become available to the researchers. Thus, the past can no longer be examined directly by him. A researcher cannot reenact the past but can only interpret it, unlike experimental research. Since history contains an inherent element of subjectivity, the final truth of any important subject can never be written. Later, historians will work with different frames of reference, new interests, and new conjectures. They will ask new questions and often discover new source material. Finally, because of the defects of the sources themselves, the total truth of an important event can never be completely established. New generations and other nationalites will always be ready to offer new insights and new interpretations of historical research the past. It ultimately analyzes. One may conclude that there is no possibility of final truth to be written. Now, what are the purposes? Number one is to reconstruct the past. What does that mean? A historian reconstructs the past systematically and objectively, reaching at conclusion that can be defended. Number two is to discover unknown events. That is, there are some historical events that occurred in the past that are not known. A historian seeks to discover these unknown events. Next is to understand significance of events. There may be significant events that may be responsible for shaping an organization, a movement, a situation, an individual being studied by a historian. To discover the context of an organization, movement, the situation, in order to explore and explain the past, a historian aims to seek the context of an organization, a movement, the situation being studied. There are several other purposes. What are they? To find answers to questions about the past. There are many questions about the past to which we would like to find answers. Knowing the answers can enlighten us to develop an understanding of the past events. Next is to study cause and effect relationships. What is that? There is a cause and effect relationship between two events. The historian would like to determine such a relationship. Next is to study relationship between the past and the present. The past can often help us to get a better perspective about current events. Thus, a researcher aims to identify the relationship between the past and the present, whereby we can get a clear perspective of the present. Next is to record and evaluate the accomplishments of individuals, institutions, and other kinds of organizations. Like historians are greatly interested in recording and evaluate the accomplishments of leading individuals and different kinds of organizations, including institutions and agencies, because these influence historical events. To provide understanding of the immediate phenomena of concern, researchers may be investigate a phenomena. Historical perspective can enable him to get a good understanding of the immediate phenomena of the concern. Next is to understand the cultural context of libraries. Libraries as institutions form an important part of culture. Study of libraries enables us to understand the culture responsible for the growth and development of libraries. Now, next, scope and application of historical research. Number one is application in library and information service, that is LIS. Historical research is very popular in the field of library and information science. At the same time, it is least understood. Often, it is considered less significant compared with other types of researches as the latter deal with issues directly related to practical problems faced by librarians. Librarians give greater importance to practical problems of their direct concern. Now, growth and development of historical research. Growth of college libraries, growth of library professionals, growth and development of reference librarianship, development of public libraries, development of library standards at the international levels, development of library equipments, development of methods for preservations of library resources, study of development of university library buildings, and as a whole, the development of libraries. Now, impact and use. Impact of historical research. Number one is impact of technology on library services, impact of information technology on cataloging practices, impact of information technology on an acquisition of periodical publications, what are the use of equipment in public libraries, use of storage media for storing of pamphlets, and the special publication in libraries. Now, what is the importance of historical research? It has contributed to the body of knowledge constituting library and information science. Library history enables librarians to understand the present in the proper perspective. History teaches us lessons. This will help us to understand and appreciate the present situation. Library history enables librarians to understand the present in the proper perspective. There is no doubt over a period of time the quality of historical research in library and information science has improved a great deal. It has become more rigorous than before, involving scientific method at different stages of research. Now, process of conducting the research. Identification of research topic and formulation of the research problem. Collection of background information or contextual information about the research topic. Formulation of the questions to be answered or formulation of hypothesis, if appropriate, to explain causal relationships between historical variables. Systematic collection of evidence or data or literature review. Rigorous evaluation of historical resources, the authenticity of the resource and validity of their contents, interpretation and synthesis into a narrative account. Now, how we collect data for historical research method? Number one, after identification of a research topic or defining the topic and formulation of the problem, now we carry out survey of the available literature. This step deals with identifying, locating and gathering information regarding the research topic. The kind of data to be gathered, the procedure to be followed and where it is to be gathered would depend upon the type of the topic being investigated. Next thing would come that to gather enough background information or contextual information. Generally start with secondary sources to find out how previous researchers have done similar research, what sources and research methodology they adopted. Every secondary source of historical data would suggest other sources including bibliographic tools. Now, how we collect data? Next comes monographs, journal articles, bibliographic tools, library catalogs, bibliographic indexing and abstracting, services, research guides, bibliography, etc. References of sources, encyclopedias, dictionaries, yearbooks and annuals, etc. Now, history is primarily based on the study of written or printed sources. Now, there is a flood of electronic sources, many of them available on the internet. Typically, these are classified as primary, secondary and tertiary sources. These may be published sources, manuscripts or handwritten non-print materials.